In the book of Acts, a man walked into a room, handed over a bag of money, and dropped dead on the spot. 3 hours later, his wife walked into the same room, not knowing what had happened to her husband. Someone asked her a question. She answered it with a lie, and she dropped dead too. Both of them buried the same day. Both of them struck down by God, in the middle of the early church, in front of witnesses, for one thing, lying about how much money they gave. This is not in the Old Testament. This is not from a violent era of conquest and judgment. This is the New Testament, the book of Acts. The same book that describes the Holy Spirit descending at Pentecost, the same community of believers who shared everything and performed miracles and saw thousands come to faith in a single day.
And almost nobody preaches on this story. Not because it's unclear, because it's deeply uncomfortable. And the reason it's uncomfortable tells you something important about what the early church actually was, and what it was not. Stay until the end, because the question this story forces you to ask is not, did Ananias and Sapphira deserve this? The real question is harder than that. And we're going to get there. Comment Acts if you've read the book of Acts all the way through, because most people who know this story found it by accident, not by intention. To understand what Ananias and Sapphira did, you have to understand what the early church actually looked like. Not the idealized version, but the real thing described in the first 4 chapters of Acts.
After the resurrection, after Pentecost, after 3,000 people came to faith in a single day, the community of believers in Jerusalem begins doing something that has almost no parallel in the ancient world. The text in Acts chapter 2 says they were together and had all things in common. They were selling their possessions and goods and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. This was not a suggestion. This was not a fundraising campaign. This was the voluntary, organic response of people who had just encountered the risen Jesus and been filled with the Holy Spirit, and whose understanding of what mine meant had been fundamentally altered. They were sharing everything: food, property, money, because the categories of individual ownership that normally structured their lives had been dissolved by something they had experienced together. Acts chapter 4 gives us a specific example that is the direct setup for the Ananias and Sapphira story, and most people miss this connection entirely. There was a man named Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, meaning son of encouragement. He owned a field. He sold it, brought the money, and laid it at the apostles' feet. That's it. No fanfare, no announcement. Just a man who sold his own land and gave the proceeds to the community. Comment Barnabas if you know who Barnabas becomes later in the New Testament, because he shows up again in a very significant way and most people don't connect him to this moment. The text places Barnabas's act of generosity immediately before the story of Ananias and Sapphira. This is not accidental. The author of Acts, Luke, is setting up a contrast. Here is what genuine giving looks like. Now watch what happens when someone tries to imitate the appearance of that generosity without the reality of it. Because Ananias and Sapphira saw what Barnabas did, they saw the response it generated, the honor, the gratitude, the standing it gave him in the community, and they made a decision. Comment plan if you think what Ananias and Sapphira did was actually a reasonable thing to do. Keep part of the money from their own property. Before you answer, wait until I explain what Peter says, because the charge isn't what most people think it is. Ananias and Sapphira owned a piece of property. Together, the text makes clear this was a joint decision, a plan they made together. They sold it, and they kept back part of the proceeds, secretly. Then Ananias came and laid the rest at the apostles' feet, presenting it as if it were the full amount from the sale. Now here is the part that almost every casual reading of this story misses, and it changes everything about what is actually happening. Nobody told Ananias he had to sell the property. Nobody told him he had to give all the money if he did sell it. Peter says this directly, explicitly, in his response. While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal? The property was theirs. The money was theirs. They were under no obligation to give any of it. let alone all of it. The early church's sharing was voluntary. The entire moral weight of the system depended on it being voluntary. What Ananias is not accused of is keeping some of the money. What he is accused of, in Peter's exact words, is this: "You have not lied to man, but to God." He presented a partial gift as if it were a complete gift. He performed the gesture of total generosity while privately withholding. He wanted the standing and honor that came with giving everything, without actually giving everything. The lie was not about the amount. The lie was about who he was. The sin wasn't keeping money, it was pretending not to. Drop same if you think it doesn't change anything. Peter says something else that is equally striking and equally overlooked. Why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit? Satan filled your heart. This is not presented as a simple moral failure or a moment of weakness. Peter is describing something that has been influenced at a spiritual level. Ananias didn't just make a bad decision, he opened a door. When Ananias hears Peter's words, he falls down and dies. The text gives no interval, no warning sign, no moment where Ananias collapses in distress and then dies hours later. He hears the accusation, he falls, he is dead. Instant if the immediacy of this, no interval, no illness, just the accusation and then death, is the part of this story that hits you hardest. Young men come, wrap his body, carry him out, and bury him. All of this happens before Sapphira returns. 3 hours pass. 3 hours in which Sapphira has no idea her husband is dead, in which the community has buried him and returned, in which the room where Ananias died is functioning again. And then Sapphira walks in. She does not know. Peter does not tell her. He asks her a question instead. "Tell me whether you sold the land for so much." He names the amount Ananias had claimed. And Sapphira says, "Yes, for so much." She confirms the lie, without hesitation, without any apparent doubt. She and Ananias had rehearsed this, agreed on this, the number they would say, the story they would tell. And she tells it. Peter says, "How is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out." And she falls down at his feet and dies. The young men come in. They find her dead. They carry her out and bury her beside her husband. The text then says, "Great fear came upon the whole church and upon all who heard of these things." That is the specific intended response the text describes. Not joy, not celebration, fear. Drop fear if you think that response is exactly right, or drop wrong if you think it's the wrong response to this story. Here is the question nobody preaches on, stated plainly. Did Ananias and Sapphira deserve to die for this? They kept some money from the sale of their own property. They lied about how much they gave. No one was physically harmed, no one was robbed, no violence occurred. And they both died instantly for it. Most modern readers, and, quietly, many pastors, find this deeply troubling. Not just uncomfortable, actually troubling. Because if God strikes people dead for lying about church donations, the implications are enormous, and the silence in most contemporary churches is deafening. So let's actually look at what the text is doing. Because there are several serious ways to read it, and none of them are as simple as, "They lied and got punished." If you came into this story expecting a New Testament answer and got an Old Testament response, because that tension is exactly what this story is designed to create. The first reading. This was a unique moment in redemptive history that does not establish a general principle. The early church was being established at a specific, unrepeatable moment. The Spirit had just been poured out, the community was forming its identity, the stakes of corruption at the foundation were existential. Just as Achan's sin in Joshua brought judgment on the whole community at a critical moment in Israel's formation, Ananias and Sapphira's sin threatened the integrity of the church at its most formative point. The judgment was calibrated to the moment, not meant to be a template. The second reading. The story is less about the money and more about what their act would have done to the community if left uncorrected. The early church's power was inseparable from its authenticity. The reason thousands were coming to faith was that something genuinely different was happening among these people. A culture of performed generosity, where people gave publicly what they had privately withheld, would have poisoned that authenticity at the root. The judgment protected the community from the inside, not from the outside. The third reading, and the hardest one. Maybe the text is not asking you to be comfortable with what happened. Maybe it is asking you to reckon with how seriously God takes what happens inside the community of faith. Not the external persecution, not the attacks from outside. What happens between believers, in the room, in the moment when no one is watching but God.
Comment your reading 1, 2, or 3 in the comments. I genuinely want to see where this channel lands on this one because there is no clean answer. If you want more of the stories the New Testament contains that nobody actually preaches on, the ones that are right there in the text, that most people have read past without stopping, subscribe now. Because this channel is specifically for these stories. And if you want to see the story that runs on almost the same engine as this one, a couple's joint decision that destroyed everything they built, watch the David and Bathsheba video next. There is something about Peter's response in this story that gets consistently underread, and it shifts the entire weight of the scene. Peter does not pronounce a sentence. He does not say because you have lied, you will die. He makes a statement about what has already happened, you have lied to God, and then describes the situation Ananias is already in. Why has Satan filled your heart? And then Ananias falls. With Sapphira, Peter asks a question first. He gives her the opportunity to tell the truth. He names the exact amount Ananias claimed. He waits, and she confirms the lie. Only then does he say, "The feet of those who buried your husband are at the door." This sequence matters. Peter is not executing a judgment. He is revealing one. He is functioning as a prophet, seeing what is spiritually true about a situation and stating it plainly. The death is not a punishment Peter administers. It is a consequence Peter discloses. Comment prophet if this distinction between Peter administering a punishment and Peter revealing a consequence changes how you read the story. Drop same if you think it doesn't matter. This connects to something Peter has been shaped by in the most personal way possible. Peter is the man who, on the night Jesus was arrested, denied him 3 times to a servant girl, not to a judge, not under formal threat of execution, but in a courtyard, informally, to avoid association with someone he had pledged to die for. He lied about who he was. He performed the identity of a stranger while being a disciple, and he was not struck dead. He was restored, by name, on the beach, after the resurrection, with a 3-fold reinstatement that directly mirrored his 3-fold denial. So Peter of all people knows what it means to lie about your relationship to something holy. And Peter of all people knows that the outcome is not always instant death. Which means this story is not saying that every lie about sacred things ends this way. It is saying that at this specific moment, in this specific community, this specific lie had consequences that could not be contained. The text says, "Great fear came upon the whole church and upon all who heard of these things." And then, immediately, the text describes the apostles performing many signs and wonders among the people. More people are added to the church. Crowds come from towns around Jerusalem, bringing the sick and those afflicted by unclean spirits, and they are healed. The community does not collapse after this event, it expands. Drop after if the connection between the judgment and the expansion surprises you, because most retellings stop before this part. This is the part nobody preaches on. The story of Ananias and Sapphira is almost always told as a cautionary tale and then left there, but the text doesn't leave it there. The text places their deaths inside a sequence where the community that experiences this judgment immediately becomes more powerful, more effective, and more trusted by the surrounding population, not less. The fear that falls on the community is not the fear of a community paralyzed by terror. It is the fear of a community that has just understood something viscerally and irreversibly about what they are part of. They are not a social movement. They are not a charity organization. They are not a support group with spiritual language. They are a community where the presence of God is real enough that deception in that presence has real consequences. That understanding changes how they carry themselves. It changes what outsiders observe when they encounter them, and it drives growth that no amount of performed generosity could have produced. Ananias and Sapphira tried to build their standing in the community through the appearance of sacrifice. The actual sacrifice. The couple that contributed to the community's integrity by being the example of what happens when that integrity is violated was involuntary, devastating, and ultimately served the community more than their planned gift ever could have. The Bible does not ask you to be grateful for that. It asks you to notice it. The question this story leaves you with is not really about Ananias and Sapphira. They are not the point. The point is the community they were part of, and what that community was. The early church worked because it was real. The generosity was real. The spirit was real. The unity was real. And the moment someone tried to substitute the performance of those things for the things themselves, the moment the gap opened between appearance and reality, something happened that made the gap impossible to sustain. We live in a world that has become extremely sophisticated at performing the appearance of things. Authenticity is a brand. Generosity is a content strategy. Community is a product offering. And none of this is new. Ananias and Sapphira were doing a version of all of it 2,000 years ago. They saw what genuine sacrifice looked like. They calculated the social benefit of appearing to make the same sacrifice, and they tried to get the return without paying the full cost. The text does not say this made them monsters. It says it made them liars. And in that community, at that moment, that was enough. Real, if this story makes you think differently about the gap between what we present publicly and what is actually true. Drop real in the comments. The reason this story is not preached on is not because it is unclear. It is because it is clear. Because it describes a God who is not impressed by the performance of generosity, who is not fooled by the appearance of sacrifice, and who, at least once in recorded history, made that point in a way that nobody who was in the room that day ever forgot. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the ones the New Testament contains that most people have read past without stopping, subscribe now. And tell me in the comments, which reading of this story do you land on? 1, 2, or 3? I'll be in the comments reading every reply. And for the next video, tell me, should we go to the most disturbing chapter in the book of Judges, or should we stay in Acts for a story that's just as overlooked as this one?